Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. I've got a very special guest with us today. His name's Warren and he is co-partnering with us on Digital, one of my other companies that I run. Warren's just recently come on board, but we thought we'll give him a bit of insights and sharing where he's from, how he's doing, and how working with us is helping him live life on purpose. Welcome, Warren.
Thanks, Darrell. It's always good to spend time with you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, good to get you on the podcast. A bit different now that we're spending time with each other with great big mics in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, obviously, just by the accent alone, you don't come from around here.
I don't.
So where do you come from?
So I'm from South Africa. I'm from Cape Town, which is sort of South Peninsula Noordhoek. So we've been here for about 4 months.
Okay.
We arrived on the 12th of January. So yeah, probably 5 months actually now. Yeah. So it's all gone well. We've actually settled in really well. It's gone extremely well, better than we had hoped.
Yeah.
So we're happy, and we've moved into Bath. We've got a place. We're renting a place there, and we've got 4 children. I'm married with 4 kids. They're also doing really well. So loving Bath, loving the adventure of coming to the UK.
Yeah, and you know, you could go to worse places in England, couldn't you?
I could.
Bath is pretty good to see.
We should, when people were asking us where we're going to go, and we just got a lot of good recommendations around Bath.
Yeah.
So a good place for youngsters as well, young people.
Yeah.
And it's worked well. So it's quite unique. It's a really unique little town, city.
Yeah.
So the kids can just walk into the city and do their gym and come back. So as far as children go and family, I think it's a really good spot.
So yeah, and obviously in terms of work and what you're working on now, you've always been involved in UI UX, hasn't you? Has that kind of been your main thing that you've been involved with since leaving school?
So I started with graphic design. So I didn't really know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And my mom had a friend at the time. We're talking a long time ago now. But my mom had a friend, and her kid was looking to go into this brand new school called Red and Yellow. And so the connection was made there. We made contact with Red and Yellow and a guy called Brian Silk-Tripp. So he was out of Ogilvy and Mather. So Ogilvy and Mather, Rightford, Silk-Tripp and Macon in South Africa. So he left the business to start the Red and Yellow School. And that was almost at the start of the whole teaching, training, learning, I guess the wave. So I was accepted there. I went into his office. He was very intimidating. He told me that I was really bad and that I was in the bottom third of the class, but he really liked me and thought he'll give me a shot.
Wow,
and
okay.
I got in. So he said, "Great, we'll give you a try." And it was, I guess, the rest is history. And I did okay. I did well. And I just went from there in graphic design. So my background is graphic design.
Yeah.
And then later on, I got into digital, which was the start of UI UX.
Yeah. So what do you think is the main discipline between graphic design and UI UX? What's the main thing that you've had to bring into what you do to service that industry better?
I think graphic design really does teach you, the principles of it. For me, doing graphic design, I had to do it required a lot of detail. I was actually really good with print. So I was really good with
which was my background.
I was really good with print, and even I was able to do some really quite unique and creative things and put them into print, and things that they hadn't done before. I would just experiment with, and it was really good. But so graphic design does teach you the craft, and it does hone you into good principles of design.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've seen is there obviously things like Canva are out there.
Yeah.
But you can still tell when someone's used Canva that doesn't know design.
I think that's exactly. I think that's the thing. So there were no when I was starting out, we had those Mac little square boxes. They actually came out.
I don't remember those. I must be really young.
So, so I learned on those little boxes.
Yeah.
And I went to a printing a business, and they were doing some courses, and so I was on one of the first guys on those Macs that were released. So I think they did freehand at the time on them. Basic
my
photo.
favorite program.
It is. I think it's a legend program. I just did so much on that. It was incredible. So freehand, Photoshop, and Quark at the time.
Yeah, I remember Quark.
So, that's what I learned on, and just sort of went from there.
It's interesting for the graphic designers. We're going to geek out a little minute, but I remember Quark, because Quark was the go-to. It was expensive.
Yeah.
And I remember there were no concessions.
Yeah.
So like literally, if you were a charity or whatever, it was always £1,500 for the box. That was it. And this was back in the days before subscriptions. So you just paid once and you had it for life until they released a new one.
Yes.
And I think it was Adobe made a decision that they had PageMaker, but then they flipped it into InDesign.
Yes.
And then they made the decision to open up concessions. And I think when they went to InDesign and opened up the concessions, like for instance, a charity would get 50% off, students would get 75% off. When they moved into that and Quark were immovable, Quark killed their business.
Yeah.
Because the migration and adoption of this new platform wasn't too dissimilar. In fact, InDesign was really good. And I remember thinking, how am I going to learn this? And I was designing a magazine. And I just said, you know what? I'm not going to touch Quark. I'm just going to use this. And by the end of building it out in InDesign, that was it. I knew how InDesign worked. Because the principles were there. And actually, I felt it was a better program. And obviously, Quark now is nowhere near used to how it was once.
Yeah.
You know, when you go Quark, it's normally the older school people that know
you definitely give yourself away when you mention Quark.
And freehand as well. So for instance, for me, it was learning those tools and seeing those tools and seeing them evolve and change in the world of graphic design. Because I remember you're talking about freehand. Freehand went and sold out to Macromedia, if you can remember.
Yes.
And Macromedia were the guys that invented Flash.
Yes, that's right.
And Dreamweaver. And that was really the beginning of web, wasn't it? In terms of those tools. You could code, but these were the first time we were starting to see tools that would complement the whole web journey. And it was like, I remember being at college with those machines, and Dreamweaver had just come out, and I said, what's this? What's Dreamweaver about? I remember thinking, not another program. But it was the emergence of everything changing, I think, in terms of it just being Photoshop, freehand, and Quark.
I think that was the first, that was the change. So things changed from there. I remember we did also 1 or 2 websites on Dreamweaver. I didn't do it myself. I asked, there was a younger designer who was actually working for me at the time.
Okay, cool.
And I just got them to figure it out. It felt like a bit of a hurdle to learn another program. But I was really good on Photoshop. I did a lot of tutorials and did deep dives in Photoshop. So I was happy there. I was very comfortable there. I knew all the shortcuts, so it was very intuitive.
Yeah, and I remember, and the thing with Photoshop, you'd have to cut people's hair out and learn how all the different tools. Now it's content fill, content aware, and it's like, where's all the skill gone? It's literally click, 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 click. There, it's done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think for me with Photoshop and the whole Macromedia journey, so Photoshop stayed with Adobe, Macromedia bought freehand, and then Adobe then put their weight behind Illustrator, because that was almost like I would say the inferior product. Yeah. But over time, eventually Adobe buys out Macromedia. Maybe, I don't know if it was for the web tools, but I remember Flash at the time when it was bought. Steve Jobs dinged Flash. Can you remember that? So basically, the iPhone had come out, and we were used to seeing websites with these Flash animation intros everywhere.
Yes.
There's this whole trend, wasn't there, of every website to have a Flash animation. And Steve Jobs said it's a terrible product and it's eating everyone's battery life. And then it was almost like the end of Flash, as there was this migration away. And I think that was the end of those tools, because very quickly Adobe then really amped up Illustrator, amped up Photoshop, and then started to develop what we see as Adobe now, which is pinged over to a subscription model, and then it pinged into all these suite of products, from Premiere to replace Final Cut and things like this. So software moves fast, hey? And I mean, that's the thing that I've seen, is that it's not when you take some time and go back, you realize how much you had to learn, because it was moving so quickly.
Yeah, it was definitely it was new. I guess I think there was a big move from at least 2010. I think I started my digital journey around 2010.
Okay,
and I don't think UI and UX were really even, they weren't even around in name yet.
No, it was just. Yeah, we didn't go that deep, did we?
Yeah.
It was just like get the site up there, and it was a brochure site ultimately. Yeah. It was just a one size fits all. We all built websites similarly. They might have had a nice little flash intro at the beginning, but the navigations of that were pretty. There was an about, wasn't there? And maybe the product and e-commerce was in its infancy.
Yeah, you're right, actually. So up to that point, I think there was a lot to learn. There was a massive migration up to that point. And then it feels like there was another migration. So from 2010, it felt like there was another massive change again when Sketch started to come in. Photoshop started to be used. So I started using Photoshop for UI design. Yeah. So Photoshop became something different, than the initial purpose. I would do my layouts, massive files at the end of the day, but doing all my UI design in Photoshop, and it actually worked. It worked, there weren't any.
That's an interesting.
There weren't Sketch, or Sketch wasn't there. No. And XD wasn't there. Yeah, so it was a new world, and Photoshop just had to fit into where things were going. Yeah,
and I think that was the trend where people were designing websites on Photoshop, and then they were being built maybe with code, or then the emergence of WordPress.
Yes,
and they were being introduced to WordPress. Yes. And thinking, oh my gosh, not another tool. And I remember learning how to edit on WordPress, but not necessarily build. And as you said, you find someone younger than you that's going to take that amount of time to figure out how it all works, and then that was it. And now WordPress is still around today, which to some degree is quite a long time as a product that we're all still using. And I know it's got things like plugins like Elementor and Divi and all these other things, but as a platform itself, that's still around, which is maybe it's the power of the community.
Yeah, it was. I think that must have been 2000 and. Well, I just remember around 2008, even before I started the digital thing, WordPress was a thing, and people were making money from doing templates.
Yep.
I don't think apart from just basic blogging, people really knew where it was going to end up and go. I also remember thinking, where's WordPress going here? People are making templates for what? But it's still around, and it's evolved. But I spent a lot of time actually learning. The reason I learned WordPress was because it's one thing to be a UI designer, but it's another thing to actually take what you've done. It's a really good exercise to design stuff out at the time, Photoshop or whatever it is, and then actually to apply it as a designer into the real world. So build it.
Yeah.
So you can actually build them. Now you build it quite easily with Elementor and those kinds of Divi that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And then you get a sense of actually how your design really fares in the real world. And then you've got to build it out into the 5 or more different responsive views. It's actually quite amazing. So WordPress has come a really long way. But for me, it was definitely worth the time to invest and learn how it worked, because it also fed back, and it cued me into code. Well, I say code, it cued me into CSS and HTML. Yeah. So then I had to start learning. And then, following that, I've had clients who came to me with problems to say, how can you sort it out? They don't know. And the inspect tool in Chrome is just an incredible tool.
Yeah, So things change massively. And I think for me, that's all in the last sort of 20-year period from just like, wow, we've gone from desktop publishing and killing the entire print industry from the basis of going from Mac to plate, almost killing that thing, and then almost going again where going print isn't the only place you can communicate. Come and communicate in this place called the cloud or the internet as it is, and here's a load of tools that can be used for that. So I think, in terms of the journey, for us as how we consume content, we as graphic designers, so to speak, have had to adapt and change quite a lot.
It's true.
We couldn't, you might be able to say, I'm just a graphic designer, and there might be some people out there that just said, that's all I do. But I think the vast majority of designers have had to learn multiple disciplines now, not just necessarily, I'm a graphic designer and that's it. You can do if you want to niche down, but I think having an understanding of how these other platforms work has allowed you to, hold down better jobs or get better jobs because you've got the understanding of multi-discipline, and ultimately growing a business, if you just doing the logo and then that's it, and then they go off and employ a web designer, then you've lost a bit of work.
I think definitely to just be a graphic designer, I think that if you want to have a business, it's going to demand that you learn. You have to go broad. And then I guess you go broad and then decide how deep you want to go in certain areas where I guess your natural talent would lie. But you have to, in my own experience, you have to go broad and understand at least the lay of the landscape and how things fit together. And if you don't have the skill, you get somebody to do it, but at least you have a lay of the land. But like I was saying earlier, like I started actually talking now, I started in a little print shop, and back in when you mentioned plates, I was sticking together. I would go to the printer, print stuff out, and then cut it out and stick it onto a piece, like business cards, stick the names onto the business cards with Pritt, and then I would use Tipex to Tipex out the bumpy edges, and then we'd make a plate from that. Yeah. So it was quite interesting. I haven't been on that journey. Yeah. I haven't thought about that for ages, but that's actually where it started. But it's interesting as well because going to that degree does tune you in to what is the end product. Yeah. And so I think again,
and I think that's where you've come, isn't it? You've gone graphic designer, and then all of a sudden you've become this because of that generalist approach. Yes. You've now begun to say, I want to work on the customer journey.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what shifted, isn't it? So you're now more of a case of servicing the clients from a user experience. The interface bit's the nice bit because you make it look pretty. Yes. But ultimately, it's about the user experience. How does it work for multiple users? And I touch on it with even with your creation with the customer journeys. You've got your customer is one user of the website, but there's partners. Yes. That will want to find out how they can partner with you on the website. There's your existing clients. Why would they go back to your website? Are you producing regular content, which is why we're doing podcasts and blogs and stuff like that. So I think when we do workshops and stuff, I think people have their eyes open to the fact that, there's more than one type of user on a website. And it's like with schools. So when we first started working with schools, it was the funniest thing. This is understanding user experience, right? So they did a competition for all the children to do essentially the graphic design on their behalf. Now, either it was someone being clever or someone trying to save money. But basically what they were doing is design our school's logo, all right? So then they put the school's logo on this brochure. Yeah. And then they put the pictures on or whatever. And then they sent these things out to try and get people to come to the school. But when I remember seeing it, it was like, if it's your kid's drawing, it's beautiful. But if it's not, then this doesn't look right. Why has that person got 3 legs or 5 legs? Or, and but the issue is that all the communication was done to the kids. And I went in and I said, who's the audience? Yes. Who makes the decision? And they were like, well, the parents. So I said, well, this isn't giving the parents the information they need to make an informed decision about sending their kids. Now, nice that your kids are involved and maybe there's a place there. Yes. But I wouldn't build your whole business around little Johnny or Martha saying, yes, I want to come to this school, because ultimately the parents need information to make that decision. And I remember sat there in the meeting and seeing the business development managers like, It's like for the first time, someone understood his pain, and we went on the journey with schools. But it's understanding who the audience is,
Yeah.
And I think that's where I've seen so much happen, even with websites and UI UX and apps and stuff like this, is that people don't understand who the end user is. And so what you end up with is a whole load of people saying this is how it should work, rather than but how's it actually work? And that's the thing with feedback, and which is all part of your arsenal in terms of what you do.
I think it's fundamental to get, especially when you're spending your clients' dollars.
Yeah.
You're spending their cash, and they want to know what is ultimately, for me, it comes down to what is the return on the investment.
Yeah.
Because you're not spending your money on a website for fun.
Yeah.
You ultimately, for most of, often it's about what return am I going to get. It may not just be cash, but it could be just affordance with customers and clients, and getting your name out there. But there has to be a return on that investment. So I think that maybe e-commerce has really raised that issue, because that's the test. If you're going to put an e-commerce website out there, it's you're going to get feedback on that. You're either going to make the sales and make the conversion, or you're not.
Yeah.
And I think that's really raised the bar in terms of how do you know your audience? Are you targeting them? What is the tone of voice for that audience?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into that, and then just testing it and making sure you're not breaking those journeys, and making that pathway to conversion, adding the least amount of resistance along that journey for the user. It's things like buttons, even just button colors, hierarchy of your. That's I guess where UI design comes in, the hierarchy of things, so that you're not confusing the customer or the client. So I think those things all add. It's a very big it's an ecosystem that pushes out the conversion.
And I think we're obviously now used to the buying journey, because we've been buying off those sites over the years. But there's things that we expect that not every shop has. Like for instance, Apple Pay.
Yes.
Apple Pay even 9 months ago, or Google Pay, 9 months, wasn't on any other e-commerce sites, apart from those thinking forward.
Yeah, you're right.
And now it's become, well, actually, if little Jimmy is being booked for an after-school club, he needs, mother's on the run trying to book it. He needs the quick way of paying.
Yes.
Apple Pay just reduces the level, so they don't have to put all their card details and their address in again, and it's just too long.
And there's no pins that are associated with that, so it works really well.
Yeah. So what's the biggest shift? Because obviously you've been in UI UX. What's the biggest thing that you've seen change in your time? Is it the customer being more educated? Do they expect more nowadays? What do you think in UI and UX? Well, certainly UX, customer experience.
I think that it's quite a good question, actually. I think the customer is now a lot more educated, so the expectation, there's a bar that has been raised. It's almost like coffee. You get customers who really know their coffee and have a great expectation, and they'll return it if it's not up to their standard. But that's been a process of education over years. Yeah, I think the same thing is with users on, for example, e-commerce. So there is a set, and the patterns have been formulated over time. So users have an expectation of how things should work and how patterns work. So I think that there's definitely a pattern and an expectation, and a lot more educated user in terms of how they're going to exit or transition through that journey. Yeah. Yeah. So which pushes it back onto, I think that's why you can't take anything for granted as well. You have to do your testing and make sure that you are meeting customer expectations, and research as well. I think research in UI, UX is really important.
Yeah, I think, and certainly a generational thing. I mean, you would work on some websites and you can't get hold of anyone because there's no phone number or whatever, and then there's a chat feature, and then no one gets back, and then those are frustrations that people have using online tech, because they're not as it's not a fluid thing. Whereas if I pick up a phone, I might have to hold, but I can genuinely get to what I need to do. And I think it's improving. I'm certainly seeing on the user experience point of view that the chat features where people can just jump onto a thread and carry the conversation on, and you can see, so you're not having to jump on and go through the whole thing again. I think that for me is a bit of an advantage now, going online on the chat as opposed to on a phone, and then you get passed on to somebody else, and that somebody else hasn't made notes, so then you're being asked the same thing again. And also because you're doing the thread and you've logged in on an app, for example, all the security, you'd have to go through that again. So I've started to see a shift in the way that your interaction, particularly with banking apps anyway, which have improved in the way that you communicating with the end user has improved tenfold. So you touch on customer experience, and you mentioned coffee, but part of your background was servicing coffee customers for many years.
Yeah, it's actually.
Do you think that's helped inform you of a customer journey?
I think that it's actually, I think it's a really good, well, number one, it's business, and that tunes you into, because ultimately what you're doing is you're servicing customers, whether it's face-to-face or remotely. And I think that doing coffee definitely tuned me into customers, the variety of people who are coming to a coffee shop, for example. But what it really, I think it boiled down to relationship as well. So that which feeds into brand. They'll come to the coffee shop for a chat because they feel part of a team, because they like, number one is they like the coffee, for example, and they will return because of the coffee and consistency. So another thing to just remember is consistency. So whenever you're doing a website, to remember consistency, because as soon as you break consistency, you're going to put a seed of doubt into somebody's mind.
The trust level.
Level. So in terms of coffee and my experience around that, it was always, and that's where training came in, was about consistency in your delivery. And I think that exactly the same principle. There's a journey. A customer will come through the door. They will come stand at the till. You almost greeting them before they've actually put their order in, because there's that level of connection that you want, and you want them to feel like they're part of what you're doing. So you're inviting them into the party in a sense, and make them feel part of the team. And I think it's exactly that same journey with the website. If you keep that, if you can keep that, and I think that's where you talk about how things could change. I think things are going to change, particularly maybe in South Africa more, but bringing stronger branding into that journey. So the journey is not just okay, there's the door and you run, but there's nothing, guiding you along the path. I think that branding, guiding you along, speaking to you as you go, is part of that seamless journey.
It's an interesting one, because during COVID, obviously a lot of restaurants and businesses flipped to almost being self-service. And one of my favorite restaurants begins with an N, ends an S. Chicken.
Okay.
Yeah. You should know. But the great thing about that is that they've kept that. As a result of it being done well, they've kept that as part of their process in terms of order from the table. And they've improved that UI UX as well. Like I've seen them invest heavily in that. And for me, that's where I've seen something that was permanently on COVID move out of there and be carried on, because it was better for the customer in terms of experience wise. I think the point of that, having those touch points that you have in a restaurant, to have those on your website is a really interesting thing that, people with existing websites need to look. Is it doing the coffee thing? Because we always go back for coffee, or tea or whatever. But just measure that journey that you experience and say, is that happening on my website? It would show you if it's done well, in terms of this customer journey. And I think that's a really, because we all know the journey. When we turn up, someone says hello, we put our order in. There's a loyalty thing where you get your stamp. So have you got a loyalty thing on your website? So there's a lot of things there. And, and is there an email that says, come in and you can get some money off at this time? So that journey alone, if you'd lifted just the coffee and just applied it to your business, so even though that's business to consumer to some degree, you could still inform your business to business using that methodology. I mean, that's what's quite strong.
Absolutely. So there's the expected journey, and the customer's familiar with the expected journey. And then you think, okay, well, how are we going to move forward? Because the customer knows, so that we've got an informed customer in digital and e-commerce. They know what to expect. They know the patterns, and what's going to make you then stand out. And I think speaking to the point of where things could go, I think it's going to swing back to relationship. And how do you bring in relationship into that journey so that people feel they're part of your brand, of take ownership, they can be stewards almost of your brand. So I think there's something really, I think that there might be a swing back into that direction, making things more relationship based.
No, I agree, because I think what's happened is, and we'll move on to apps, but what's happened is the technology or the code or the developers are the one that have been leading the decision making.
True.
Often at the expense of the customer.
True.
So, like, well, I can't build it. I haven't got time. The deadline's tight. Yeah, we get that. It normally is. But, we've got to go back and say, well, it might not have the time, but we need to put that time in, and that time needs to be built in at the start of the process. So rather than spend loads of money on actual technical build, we just need to spend more money in research and customer journey and building out before we even commit code, and I think not enough time is spent often because we're trying to build everything in one go. Yeah. So we've got to build every feature we can think of and chuck it on the poor coders. And they're like, I'm trying to build all this code, but it's too much.
Yes.
And I think that research part is where what we're seeing in digital is that aspect of coming up with that minimum viable product. What's the quickest, simplest, cheapest, leanest way of realizing an idea, getting users and getting their feedback to inform the future development. Because I think, having been working with you recently, we've seen it, been in rooms where someone said they've just spent 20 grand on something, and we both looking at each other like, oh my gosh, how did they get away with that?
Yeah, it's true.
And for me, that's scary. And I think the other thing is, in the bid circles, if they've won money, which is government money.
That's right.
And they've won it, and then they've just spent it on people just seeing the cash, and then thanks very much, you don't know enough. Goes back to its relationship, its customer journey. Even at the result of the business behind the business, there needs to be relationship there as well to build the right thing. Because what I've seen is too many times where people have blown £20,000 like that, and it's not the right thing.
And you don't have anything to show. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree. Doing that research up front, it actually clarifies. Doing a lot of research up front clarifies what you're going to be building. Yeah. And then you don't want the dev team informing that customer experience. You need to do all that work, all that research up front, and then prioritize your features and what features are you going to prioritize for an MVP? Test the MVP, and then see what comes back. I think there's also even in saying that, you've got to be careful with releasing MVP, because MVP is not an excuse to push something out that is not good.
Yes,
MVP is an opportunity to test your best minimum viable product, and then get feedback on your best minimum viable product with the features that are going to be meaningful to your user. You don't want to go there with something that is, that is okay, and it's not tested correctly, and then you're going to get poor feedback, and you're going to impede your brand or what you're trying to do in the long run.
No, that's a really good point, because what I've seen is that when people go down the MVP route, it's like, it's progress, not perfection. Yeah, when we talk perfection, it's not you build every damn feature out, so it's the end result. Because by the time you do it, it's taken you 3 years and someone else has got there.
Yes.
No, it's saying, how do you onboard customers, but do it well? So they're like, oh, it would be really nice if this did this. And you might have already got that in your hierarchy of priorities.
Features, yeah.
You might go, yeah, or you may not have thought it, or the developer has come back and said, oh, I'm thinking about this as an idea, it needs to be built out, but what do you think? And allowing that feedback from developers, from UI, UX, from customers, as well as the client, make for a better experience. And I think what we've fallen into is that we go, oh, well, let's just build an MVP and just smash it out and get it done. But that's not helping anyone, because you've got legacy code issues if you built it with code.
Yes.
Because you built it, you've delivered it, but there's bugs all over the place, which again, which is damaging the brand. So you've built all this money on brand marketing and done all these Facebook campaigns, and then they go to use it and it doesn't work.
Yes.
You know, it's a bad thing. And that journey being mapped out properly, making sure it works 100%. So yeah, I think progress over perfection is one thing, but don't see perfection as an excuse to be rubbish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So
Warren, I just asked you, because I know there's some people out there that might be asking the question, what's the difference between websites, because we've touched a bit on that, but apps, as in apps, the things that, why would you build an app over a website? What would you say?
I think apps really would speak to some core features. So if you're doing insurance, for example, you would have your big insurance website, and then you would pull out or extract a lot of those core features and put them into your app that makes it very accessible and usable. But the other key thing to remember is that there's a very big migration onto. Even right now, there's a big migration into mobile. So people are using mobile over desktop, and so that is a key point right there.
Yeah.
But in terms of why do an app, I think that definitely it streamlines the application process. It streamlines your features and makes them accessible.
Yeah, because I've seen like my insurance app on my car, you know, you wouldn't upload the documents necessarily to the website. You do all that now through the app, or update your details on the app rather than stay on the phone and hold forever. So that's how I've seen the benefit of the app. But it's been very clear of what features you want to extract to simplify the end user experience. Yeah,
so definitely that makes it. Also, apps are good places to test things out as well. I know that some apps that I've worked on, the businesses have WhatsApp groups, and then they do their testing. It's a core set of users who love the app, and then they push new features and things into this group and ask for feedback, and they get great feedback. And that's a good way to do it as well.
Yeah. So. I mean, we've touched on a little bit about research and stuff, because I think we do a thing within digital, which is the Discovery Compass.
Absolutely.
And, you know, people can find out more about that on the website on digital, which is di9ital.co.uk. Got that. And you can book a Discovery Compass, and it's essentially spending money, understanding exactly what you're supposed to build.
Exactly. Right.
And not enough people do that. And I've seen people that have won bids that haven't done that, and they're trying to build it all rather than build some. And so, you know, that's one way that we've reacted to what's out there, and say, look, how can we help these people? Obviously, we've got to put our time and effort in there, but how do we help them have confidence that they're spending the money on the right thing? Because that solves half the problems.
Yeah, absolutely. The Discovery Compass gets you in a room, forces you to really pull apart your idea and explore in detail. And also sometimes when as a business person, or if you have as an entrepreneur, you've got an idea, you're very excited about the idea. Things always look different. When you actually build them out, you have all these wonderful ideas. As soon as you start building things out, it can take on a life of its own. And I think the Discovery Compass is really fantastic, because it does force you to look at your idea in detail, and from the perspective of, gets you thinking from your client perspective, as well as what are you trying to achieve here. It also strips down so that it marries your budget versus your features. And so that's another really important thing to establish up front. What is your budget, and what can I build with that budget, and then step it out. So if you have a budget coming, a quarterly budget, or if it's a once-off, you need to then decide, okay, what am I going to build for 20 grand, build it, and then on using the cash that comes in or doing some more funding, you can build out the rest. But the other thing is that it's important to, even up front, to version it out and decide what features are you going to put in those different versions. Even if you only get to version 1 or 2 in a year or 2, whatever, but to have a pathway for success, a pathway, for that growth, I think it's really important, because then that's also going to inform the tech stack that you're going to use up front. Because you also don't want to spend a huge amount of that cash on a tech stack that's not going to carry you as the business grows. So that's what it does. It exposes everything. Yeah,
and I think what we've done is that we've allowed people to build the MVP if they have to with no code tools to get the users on board.
Yes, exactly.
To then build up a pot of money that they can spend on, if you like, more detailed development to scale it. So. Warren, it's been a fantastic time that we've had on the sofa. I'm sure we're going to be doing it again.
Yeah, thanks.
But thanks for coming. Thanks for coming and discussing a bit about tech and geeking out on graphic design and stuff like that.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Cheers.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Purpose People podcast. You can follow us online. You can like and subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us on Apple, Google, Amazon, and Spotify. And if you see any clips on our Reels, which is on Instagram or Facebook, or even on TikTok, please give it a like, please give it a share, and please tell your friends. We'd love for you to take part in a Purpose People questionnaire that is also through our website at creation.co.uk, and hopefully you can find yourself living a life on purpose.